Welcome back to the next episode of Action Reaction with me, Zane Simon, joined by my co-host Troy O'Diamond, and we're gonna do something a little different this time. A lot of our show so far has been really combative, and we've really, I don't want to say we've delighted in going after each other, but we've gone after each other a lot over the few episodes we've done, and so I think, especially after the fiasco that was White House Down. We really wanted to try to do something to bring us more on the same page, make the show a little less angry, a little more friendly, a little more of a cheerful meeting of minds. And to that point, this episode, we have decided to unite over our mutual love of Paul Verhoeven and do a Paul Verhoeven themed action reaction episode where we just talk about awesome Paul Verhoeven movies and our love of Paul Verhoeven movies. And yeah, I think it's just going to be something that's allows us to be more friendly and, keeps me from berating you for having terrible taste, because at least in this point, you don't have terrible taste.
I accept your apology.
I think that's essentially, I'm glad that you accept it without me having to say it, because I would have a lot of trouble actually apologizing, but yeah, I think this way it works.
Yeah, no, we have some common ground, and we can both agree that there are some movies that, regardless of our differences, just objectively fucking rule.
This is very true. Nothing about Total Recall doesn't rule.
I was going to lead off with RoboCop, but I mean, for our listeners who aren't as familiar with Verhoeven as we are, do we want to give a little bit of background? You can talk about his early career real quick.
Yeah, I mean, Verhoeven started out in he's a Dutch director, started out in the Netherlands making some TV shows and some sort of more typical dramas. And then he slowly sort of evolved into these more, what I would describe as genre film, or these sort of unusual, violent and action-esque movies before jumping over to English language films.
And we need to specify that when he came into English language films, over that decade, he pumped out 3 straight-up classic movies, starting with RoboCop and going on to Starship Troopers and Showgirls.
Yeah. Showgirls is not a part of that run. Okay, no, that is very clever, Troy. It's very clever of you to include Showgirls instead of.
We can call it a quadrilogy if you want to include Total Recall.
Okay, maybe we include Total Recall in there. But and it's still, either way, going, from Starship Troopers in 1997 back to RoboCop in 1987, and for me, going all the way back to The Fourth Man in 1983, Verhoeven has a run that puts him in the same ballpark for me as directors like John Carpenter and David Cronenberg, who I think are a little more highly regarded as these sort of like weirdo pseudo-action directors. I mean, Carpenter is very much an action director, but Cronenberg kind of depends on the day and the time and the person you're talking to. But I think that Verhoeven, he doesn't get quite the respect that he deserves for being part of that class for me, of these directors who have this very specific, really good set of films that they made.
Yeah, and I think that's part of why we both wanted to do this show. Is a big part of why I think Verhoeven doesn't get that respect is because he is in the action genre, and people just look at his movies and, oh yeah, it's guns and quips and stuff like that. But it's very much high art.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a big part of it is, and like Cronenberg is so obviously making artsy shit when he makes his movies that like the fact that he's made some like really weird violent stuff like The Fly and Scanners and stuff like that, like you wrap that up with his other films, and people are like, oh no, Cronenberg is an artist who also makes some unusual crazy films. A lot of what people know from Verhoeven is really just like ultra violence
Right. And a
and
lot of gore.
a lot of gore, and it really, I think it creates this wall between his movies and the idea that they could be also really good, thoughtful, artistic, interesting pieces. Like I love RoboCop a ton, but I also really love Total Recall, and I think it may be one of, if not the best. It's certainly in discussion for best '90s sci-fi movie.
Yeah, unfortunately, the last time I saw Total Recall was in a dive bar with subtitles on, and I was pretty plastered. But what I remember of it, yeah, fantastic. Takes off an old lady's head and throws it at people, and it blows up. It's dope.
It's amazing. And so it's one of the best sci-fi movies of the '90s. But people look at it and they're like, "Oh yeah, that ultra-violent Arnold Schwarzenegger movie that
With
isn't
the
Predator."
chick with three titties.
Yeah, with three titties that isn't Predator. Uh, one of those being Jesse Ventura in that movie. But it, uh, it's nonetheless like, his ability to create these like gory action filled action vehicles has masked to me, I think, for a lot of people, what is a really subtle and interesting series of films.
Yeah, and what I feel like goes unrecognized a lot is he does pick what the themes of his movie are going to be and builds around that. And it's how he ends up really creating elevated action movies. Where, I mean, is there a particular theme that you felt like Total Recall really got across really well?
Well, I think the thing that Total Recall does really subtly and really perfectly is that like he does an extremely good job of actually creating a nuanced idea. Is this a dream or is it not? Like, is everything that's going on a virtual reality simulation that he can't escape from? Or is this something he's actually going through? Because by the end of the movie, you never know. Like, you never find out. But there are these moments where, it's like they bring in a doctor who's supposed to be uh on the outside and is being projected into his dream, and the doctor is like, you have to let me help you, you have to accept this, and you have to let me help you right now, and you have to take this pill basically,
Right.
or you won't escape from this dream. And Schwarzenegger looks at him, and the doctor's sweating, and that's his cue that this isn't a dream and I need to kill this guy and get out. But that's not a good fucking cue. Like, the fact that this guy is nervous that you may not take a pill and like wake up and get out of the dream in this incredibly tense situation that you've created, like, that says nothing about whether it's virtual reality or not.
Yeah, and to the original point, like he does a great job of playing with the perception of reality
Yeah,
throughout the entire movie. And by like really starting with, okay, here's our idea. We are going to constantly question whether our not narrator, but whether we have a
our hero.
reliable view into this.
Yeah,
Yeah. And by just that, it's even in this fairly vulgar movie where somebody's eyes pop out, then you do end up with this really good piece of art within that.
and to that point too, then with RoboCop, I mean, RoboCop is sort of the is I would I would love to say it's the most misunderstood, but it's not, because Starship Troopers exists. But
Yeah.
like RoboCop, really, the fact that it came out with this X rating, or like the ultra violent, unacceptable sort of, oh, way too far over the top, we can't show this to anyone thing, really blinded people from how cutting that movie is against American society and American cinema, especially.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up cutting, because there is just so much cocaine in.
That is, God damn it.
Like, there's a whole
Yes,
factory of it.
yes, that is definitely cutting can lead to cocaine. You're right. You've hit upon a theme.
Yeah.
Well done.
And I don't. Okay, one of the questions that I always have when I watch this movie is, what did they do with all of that blow when they were done with it? Like, did the extras get to take some home, or did that all go through on set? I don't know. Just seems like an interesting thing.
I get the feeling they maybe they didn't use real cocaine in the movie, but it's Detroit in the 80s. I mean,
Yeah,
Detroit
this was
anytime, so maybe it was
came
cheaper.
out,
Maybe it's cheaper to get real cocaine in Detroit than it would have been to like make movie cocaine.
yeah, and what, they filmed it in 86. I mean, I gotta believe that it was cheaper to just get like a bunch of actual coke for that.
It could be.
And I mean, it was a pretty realistic depiction.
I would really like to think that the dad from that 70s show was just coked out of his skull the whole time.
Oh, absolutely. And I love, isn't he the one who does the line of, there's something about the smell? Is it, doesn't he deliver that line when they're negotiating with the crime boss?
I think he does. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
You've caught me out on that line in particular because it's not a line I remember.
Because it brings me to today's sponsor.
Oh, a sponsor. We didn't. I thought we didn't have sponsors.
Well, I have a sponsor. Do you love the smell of cocaine? Do you want to wake up to the soothing scent of blow, but you don't have like a glass table in your house? Let me tell you about Ski Slope scented candles. Your room will smell like fresh cut blow all day without getting powder all over your debit card.
You know, I do use my debit card a lot, and I can't afford to have powder on it. So this does sound like right up my alley.
Yeah, so when you miss the smell of pure driven snow, go to cokecandles.org and use promo code ODiamonds for 15% off your order. That's cokecandles.org and promo code ODiamonds.
Oh God. Yes, this is the future that we are pushing towards. So if we're still on the air next week, our new sponsor is cokecandle.org.
Yeah. And there's no cocaine in the actual candle. This is fully FDA compliant. There's no reason for the FBI to come talking to me. This is all fine. It's just there's something about the smell.
Okay, so I'm going to try to move past this smoothly, which is already becoming difficult. But I mean, one of the things that's interesting to me with RoboCop being Verhoeven's introduction to Hollywood. It's not his first English language movie. That was Flesh Plus Blood, made in 1985.
Killer title.
But, yeah, it's but the thing to me that's interesting is it kind of feels like, I think for a lot of people maybe, that Verhoeven just kind of like splashes on screen with RoboCop, literally, you know, like the dude splashes on the windshield when he gets turned into toxic waste.
Yeah, and this is a note that goes for another movie, or really all of his movies, but man, the gore is very, very, I think is the best way to describe it.
It's lovely. And I feel, you know, I can see how pretty easily, if you're approaching Verhoeven only really through RoboCop forward, like RoboCop 2 Starship Troopers, it really feels like he just kind of comes out of nowhere as like this super gory director who starts off like out of the gate with a home run.
Right.
And if you actually go back and watch, like I've watched several of his earlier films, Soldier of Orange and The Fourth Man and Flesh Plus Blood. And it's really a lot more of this like slow build. Like RoboCop is really the slow process and evolution of a director's style. That, I mean, especially like, if you just jump back to Flesh and, or I'm going to call it Flesh and Blood. Flesh plus Blood is just way too much of a mouthful. But if you go back to Flesh and Blood, which is a medieval movie starring Rutger Hauer about this band of mercenary knights who take over this castle in the middle of nowhere and only to find out that it's plague riddled.
Sold. You have sold me on this movie already.
It's like super gory. I will say too, if you're going to be super sold, it's also kind of rapey. Just be forewarned.
Okay.
I
notice that happens a lot more in your movies than in mine.
It's something with like artsy directors. A lot of them, rape is just like this really
thing they do in the 70s.
A thing they did in the 70s a lot, apparently. And it's also just this kind of throwaway plot device of like, I need to make my movie grittier and like give it more punch against mainstream cinema.
Yeah, well, I'm glad pop culture's moved past that.
Oh God, I wish. But anyway, but going all the way back to Soldier of Orange, which is this World War II movie about Dutch resistance fighters, and it's got a lot of like there are like all these little touches of visceral gore. They're like a bomb blows up and people's legs are hanging off, and there's bits of flesh everywhere, and people getting shot and stabbed and tortured and things like that through what is otherwise a very normal, like a very sort of standard, big dramatic sort of epic war movie about like a spy movie. It's like this big sort of evolving spy movie over several years in World War II. But there are all these touches of like violence and gore and sex. And then you jump up to The Fourth Man, which is one of my favorite Verhoeven movies that I am going to make you watch at some point. But it's not an action movie, so it doesn't really fit our theme. And it's all about this alcoholic writer who goes to visit this woman who helped organize a talk he was giving, and he becomes infatuated with her and is living with her and staying with her, and then he slowly becomes convinced that she is a mass murderer who has killed all of her prior husbands, and that he will be next if he stays with her.
All right.
And
it's fun.
So you get to that, which is like this much more sort of weird, getting weirder, getting more violent. Then you get to Flesh and Blood, where you have like the full-on like gore-filled, rape-filled, sex-filled, violent action movie. And then he launches into Hollywood, and it's like Hollywood gave him a budget and had this great thirst for action and sex and violence that we've had. And you have all of your Die Hards and Lethal Weapons and your Body Heat and all these other like very you have all your sexual movies, you have like something that Hollywood really takes to. And they gave him a budget, and they're like, yeah, run with this RoboCop movie. And suddenly it's just like, holy shit, we did not know what we were getting.
Yeah. And I feel like one of the best parts about this is, and it's actually a trap that even we kind of just fell into, is there is like the connective tissue of Verhoeven movies that, like you said, he sort of grew into of, we're going to make this gory, we're going to make this violent, we are going to, or not just violent, ultra violent. And that's what runs through his movies. But each of them really tackles kind of their own unique theme. And I think that's, again, what helps him elevate these into movies that are actually bringing you and me together to talk about how much they actually fucking rule.
Yeah.
So, I mean, with that said, was there a particular theme of RoboCop that you were able to latch onto? Because there's a couple, and I want to know what really stuck out for you.
Well, there are three things about RoboCop that stand out to me in absolute terms. One of them being obvious, like the biggest, most obvious one is the whole sort of extreme satire and takedown of 80s excess and like 80s corporate society, corporate America. Very
Right.
like Wall Street, money never sleeps kind of thing, and all that, but with this like ultra Machiavellian bent to it. And the and then you have the whole theme of action Hollywood, and like, yeah, you think you want violence, and you think you want crime movies, and you think you want all these specific ideas. And what if we just ramp them up to 11, to coin a Spinal Tap phrase,
Right.
and all of a sudden people are just like, people have to question, is this what I wanted? Did I want like the most violent thing I could possibly imagine? But one of the things that I find really fascinating about RoboCop, and that I'm going to touch, is like, one of the things that really gets to me the most is how circular it is. Ro- RoboCop is a movie that really, a lot of it is a lot of the earlier parts of the movie are mirrored as the movie goes along into the second half, so that you know what things of like how oh, the main Peter Weller's character, what's his name? Not
Murphy.
Robo. I know his name's RoboCop, but the character,
Pretty sure it's Murphy.
yeah,
Something Murphy.
Murphy. Like when he introduces himself as Murphy, and then like later on, Nancy Allen introduces him as like, Murphy, it's you, and it's like these themes and these lines and these positions that get repeated as the movie goes on, the ways that that Peter Weller's character pre RoboCop interacts with people post RoboCop, and the ways that he tries to rebuild that same humanity, are actually like really, really carefully crafted in ways that you don't realize when you're just going through it.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the themes that a lot of people latch onto, because he does a great job of being like, all right, this is the loss of identity and regaining it throughout the course of the movie. And it's actually I was surprised again when I watched it, just how well paced this movie is. But I want to get back to your first point about how this reflects corporate culture. Because while you're grounding it in the 80s, I feel like that's a little too limiting for what this movie does, where they start out very early on with talking about how there's a heart surgery that somebody could need that qualifies for health tax credits. And yeah, then we're very quickly learning that there's a company that has a contract to privatize law enforcement, which is like what sets up the movie. That's why there's a RoboCop. That's why there's an Ed 209 robot. And even later in the movie, they talk about other industries that are traditionally regarded as nonprofit that have moved into being privatized. And they specifically mention hospitals, prisons, space expedition, and now they're privatizing the police force. This coming out again in 1987 after many years of Ronald Reagan domestically, but I mean, there was a very big shift towards deregulation and privatization. And I feel like grounding this in just the 80s doesn't, because when you look through this movie, when you look through the way it's portrayed, even when I can't remember the name of the main guy, Dick Jones, basically the guy in charge of creating this militarized police force, he creating the Ed 209, even knowing that it was flawed and saying he knew it was flawed because he could sell it to the military, he would get an order for that, is perfect. There's that, and then as soon as another big plot point is they're building their own new city, and the main worst bad crime guy is working with Dick Jones, this capitalist, and you see how quickly, how fast he is to cut a deal with this guy and say, just there's so many similarities between like their excesses, their ruthlessness, and their lack of fucking regard for humanity. Because this guy, when this industry creates a city, what do? He says, "Oh, you criminal guy, you can come in here and run the prostitution and the drug trade. All of it that can be yours." The guy's interest in business, this absolute caricature, or not even caricature, realistic portrayal of capitalism, is their sole interest is the accumulation of wealth. It is funneling wealth upwards to them. And they're in this movie, they're doing it with healthcare and they're doing it with prisons. And the only difference between their world and ours is that they got to law enforcement already. And we haven't done that yet. And we live in a fucking Verhoeven movie.
Oh, yeah, that's unfortunately very true. And it's also
FBI, again, please do not. Please don't.
Yeah.
That's the thing that absolutely fucking kills me about this movie is every time I am sitting there enjoying the violence and the drugs and the tits and the drugs off of tits while being just fucking enraged by every bit of beautiful, wonderful satire that Verhoeven has put, or maybe not even satire, but just the way that he basically did like the documentary Hypernormalization, but like 30 years early and looking forward.
Yeah, that unfortunately too, it's sort of the thing where it's like there's Paul Verhoeven's super nasty crime-riddled Detroit looks better than Detroit now.
Yeah, and there's also a fucking billionaire who's trying to rebuild our real Detroit.
I know. Yeah.
I mean, between this and we're going to get to Starship Troopers, but if you told me Verhoeven was a time traveler sent back to warn us about exactly the bullshit we're about to do, then I would believe it. He predicted exactly the world that we have ended up with.
It's sad because I do believe that Verhoeven did set out to be satirical. Like he wanted to mirror a hyper reality. You know, it wasn't supposed to be a direct impact take on reality as we end up with it. And I was even reading a piece earlier today about how RoboCop came about, and it had been shopped to these other directors. They tried to get Alex Cox to make it, from the guy who made Repo Man, among other things, if you've seen that, and he didn't want it. And Verhoeven saw the script and he just threw it away. And apparently his wife got it out of the trash and made him go back to it and was like, "No, look, you can do a lot with this and make it satirical and really play up all these aspects and kind of really find avenues to create these sort of grotesque reflections of society." And that was what sold him on the movie. And it is just a little, it feels a little,
it's on the fucking nose. It's a little on the nose.
A little on the nose.
And I mean, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, he took kind of that same approach nearly a decade later with Starship Troopers.
Yeah,
but even more directed.
Starship Troopers as well.
Yeah, I mean,
Starship Troopers, on that note, makes me very fearful of where we're going to be in 50 years if it's just going to be Starship Troopers.
Oh, to me, Starship Troopers explains where we are now.
Well, yeah, but I mean, actually, in space, creating Holocaust on bug monsters.
Yeah, and I think it's worth talking about the original Starship Troopers, the Robert Heinlein novel that was incredibly pro-fascism.
That is a thing for sci-fi and fantasy writers to do. It seems as a group, they seem to be very open to really dumb shit. What's his name? L. Ron Hubbard, who invented Scientology, and
the
guy from the guy who did the really racist one, the racist fantasy horror author.
I'm probably getting a different name here, but Vox Day
No,
also
no, the
fits
one
that.
who did all the like creatures of the deep and demon from
Oh,
other.
J.R.R. Tolkien,
He's not J.R.R. Tolkien. Uh, the big tentacle octopus monster thing that
Cthulhu guy. I'm
Cthulhu,
blanking on the name too.
Cthulhu.
Yeah,
Who wrote Cthulhu? Who wrote about H.P. Lovecraft? There we fucking go. God damn it.
yeah.
But H.P. and like H.P. Lovecraft being ultra racist. There's something about writing this kind of speculative fiction that seems
It's
to.
sorry, I was going to say it's almost like when you start with the concept of violence against a dehumanized. That maybe you might be kind of into fascism.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's what it is. But so the Heinlein novel is, yeah, it's this sort of pro-fascist, militaristic celebration, right?
Yeah, and one of the great things about Starship Troopers is, I mean, I feel like it's more open about how much it's trying to lampoon that. Where RoboCop, like someone can watch it and oh yeah, fun action movie, I like it. Where Starship Troopers, you either pick up on it and realize it's terrible, or you're like ready to enlist.
Yeah, that's the thing with Verhoeven too, and unfortunately, I think Starship Troopers seems to have been so boldly that it for a little while kind of, I don't know if it killed his career or Verhoeven just voluntarily left and stopped making movies for a while. But Starship Troopers, he made Hollow Man 3 years after that, and then he didn't make
Beautiful Kevin
another
Bacon
movie
vehicle.
until 2006, and he's only
Yeah,
worked very sporadically since then.
somehow I get the feeling that people just thought, oh, Starship Troopers was too silly and didn't read into it at all. Where, oh my God, if you watching Starship Troopers after basically just watching the war in Iraq happen and how all that went, it's a very clear thing what Verhoeven's trying to do. He's trying to undermine violence in the name of nationalism. He's trying to not go against like the fetishization of militarism, and a lot of people didn't pick up on it. But
Well, part of it is too, weirdly, that's like, I think this is maybe this is what has created this rift with Verhoeven and like Verhoeven and popularity in terms of like artistic recognition, is that he always seems to be working 2 or 3 levels of satire at once. Because
yeah, that's true.
it's not only is Starship Troopers very much this commentary on fascist militarism and fetishization of the military, but it's also a commentary and like a satire of like teen high school soap operas.
Oh yeah, and I will say that it does pay off where eventually Diz gets to bone her man, but she could do better. God,
Mm-hmm.
she's the best character in that movie. She's the only person with like decent motivations and good decision making.
Yeah, she really is. It, yeah, and it's such a like, it's that clash of like being 90210 in space and being this like space army bug killing movie and being an anti-space army bug killing movie. And
Yeah,
it's a problem. I think, like I said, I think that Starship Troopers is sort of, I love it. It's not quite maybe what you'd call jumping the shark, but it is
no,
but it's this ultimate, like, it's this ultimate level of what RoboCop and Total Recall were leading to, where RoboCop, you're satirizing Hollywood cinema and its infatuation with violence. You're satirizing uh, power economics in politics, and how and how modern business just does not care about people at all and treats them like commodities, and you are creating this reflective movie of how a man, like, of the loss and regain of humanity. And with Total Recall, like, you've got this action, another ultra violent action movie that's sort of a commentary on violence in cinema and sex in cinema, with like Sharon Stone in it, and
God, she's fine in that movie.
yeah, and you've got this commentary on like the line between dream and reality, and all these, and another sort of commentary on like corporations treating people like a commodity, and trying to like this sort of interplay between how governments treat, in this case it's space mutants, but how they treat people they have no desire for, and things like that. And all layered with this action movie, and these things they're like subtle enough that you can just watch as an action movie, whereas Starship Troopers is that moment where you really have to pick a side. Like,
yeah. And well, I think another one of the issues with people not picking up on Starship Troopers is that some of like the most cutting satire could be confused for other things that just seem like bad writing.
mm-hmm.
Where, like, to me, one of the things that really jumped out when I watched again is when Johnny Rico is getting punished for instructing the guy to take off his helmet in a live action thing.
Yeah.
And they are talking about doing some real old roots shit and calling it administrative punishment. It's very enhanced interrogation sort of phrasing of fucking whipping a guy in town square.
Yeah.
And then, like, another moment, there's like a newscaster saying, some say the bugs were provoked by human intrusion into their habitat, and that a live and let live policy is preferable to war. And immediately his response is, I'm from Buenos Aires, and I say kill them all. And to listeners who haven't seen it, the context is that Chris got blown the fuck up by the bugs. It's basically the Earth 9/11 there. Also, everybody in Buenos Aires is a white guy? Is a white person? Like,
that's actually one of the things I love about that movie.
Me too.
Is the white homogenization of the entire planet. This idea that everybody in this future is this sort of like super suburban, super like clean. Like I said, it's this very 90210. Even when people aren't white, it's this very like whitewashed version of diversity, where we're all the same white people with different colored skin.
Yeah. And I feel like that's a big part of what makes this movie so fucking good. Is like, this wasn't a whitewashed cast because that's what they do. It's an artistic choice because that's exactly how a society with this sort of fascistic inclination would look in Buenos fucking Aires.
So I want to I want to jump off here, and we need to figure, like, we both have some Verhoeven movies we need to see again, because I know for me I need to see L, which just I'm assuming it's L, maybe it's Ellie, I don't know.
Oh yeah, the new one.
The new one that's supposed to be very good, with Isabelle Huppert, who I love. But more than that, I was looking at this like prime Verhoeven run, and I really need to rewatch Hollow Man and Basic Instinct.
And Showgirls.
I'm not rewatching Showgirls.
You don't want them to go shroom titties?
I'm okay. Well, we're on turn.
It's a beautiful story about somebody rising in rank and power throughout the course of a lot of tits.
This is our friendly. We're making up. We're trying to be friends here.
Okay. Yeah, fine.
But I personally, I watch movies for movies. I watch porn for porn. Like,
why create a difference?
Crossover that much.
I mean, this reminds me of one of my favorite lyrics right now from a Jeff Rosenstock song where he's talking about just getting high and drunk in a hotel room and just says, I feel amazing when I'm alone switching between porn and RoboCop. And it's the most relatable thing I've ever heard.
I can absolutely see why being alone and drunk and porn and RoboCop seems like everything that makes sense to you in your life. Yes.
It's really relatable.
Yeah. For some people, I mean, I may or may not be drinking a Manhattan right now and looking at this Showgirls poster, but
I may or may not be drinking straight Evan Williams. That's warm.
Anyway, I'm not watching Showgirls. That's the point I'm trying to make here.
Okay, well, look, I can do an edit for you with some very titillating scenes.
I do not need your... I don't need your supercuts version of Showgirls.
You don't need it, but trust me, you want it.
So, I need to know then, like... And, you know, you got to watch a couple of Verhoeven movies again. Is there anything on this that you're, like, now chomping to rewatch again?
I feel like I do need to watch Total Recall again with volume, not with necessarily with sobriety.
It doesn't require sobriety.
Yeah, I didn't think so. And now that I remember that there's a version of it that doesn't have Colin Farrell and the dad from Malcolm in the Middle, it's just a right time to revisit it.
Total Recall is absolutely worth revisiting. And I really need you at some point to watch The Fourth Man because it's crazy good.
I tried watching it, and within the first like 5 minutes, I was really, there's one thing I really like and one thing I really don't like, where there were a lot of dicks and a lot of spiders. So it was tough for me to get past the spiders, and it just lost me there.
You're gonna have to go further. You have to go deeper, Troy. You have to go deeper.
Why are you talking about going deeper as soon as we're talking about dicks? Is there more stuff about dicks in this movie?
A little.
Okay, fair enough. Fair warning to anyone else who is taking Zane into The Fourth Man. Not well groomed.
The Fourth Man is definitely there's a lot of sex in it, and you know, some of it's a little bit of it's gay. Most of it isn't. It's probably the most sexual movie I own, but it's also just amazing. It is Verhoeven at his it's the pre-Hollywood maximum weirdo Paul Verhoeven.
Wait, is this the most sexual movie you own because it's more sexual than Caligula, or do you not own Caligula?
I do not own Caligula.
I thought you liked 70s classics.
Why do I get the feeling that Caligula is the only 70s movie you have seen?
I don't know. I mean, it's got a lot of good actors and actresses. It's got Helen Mirren. It's got Clockwork Orangey guy. It's strong production company behind that one.
I feel like you could... I'm not saying you personally can do better than watching Caligula, but Malcolm McDowell with the fist up his ass is not the height of high cinema.
Wait, did he get the fist up his ass, or did he put his fist up an ass?
I
thought he put his fist up the guy's ass after he fucked his wife.
Oh, okay.
After he fucked the guy's wife.
There you go. See, you have a much clearer remembrance of this movie than I do.
Really solid, guys.
Yeah, Caligula, not a lot to do with Paul Verhoeven.
Sorry for the spoilers. I don't want to ruin the fist up ass scene, but just know that it happens. It's about halfway through the movie, so you know it's not going to ruin your whole experience.
On that note, did you have any final points you want to touch on before we close this whole thing down?
Verhoeven movies are cokecandles.org, and RoboCop makes me really mad and really happy at the same time.
All right. On that note, you can find me on Twitter at TheZaneTime. You can find Troy on Twitter at PDLMMA. I do want to say quickly, in closing, I do feel like this was a very even-keeled, very friendly episode. I think this is something we can continue this back and forth and really meeting of minds. I felt better about this, you know? Yeah.
I think we can make this show a little more respectful than we have in the past. And, yeah, I'm looking forward to picking a theme and talking about something that we'll both really enjoy next week.
All right, I'm going to continue trusting you to pick themes. It has not worked out in the past, but
But
this Verhoeven thing got me feeling recharged.
yeah, we're turning over a new leaf on this show.
All right. Well, I'm glad to hear it. As I said, you can find us both on Twitter and give us a like on YouTube, thumbs up thing, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our SoundCloud. You can download all our stuff on SoundCloud. Hopefully, we'll be up on iTunes soon. And I'm working on maybe getting some t-shirts and stuff like that we'll be selling. So look out for that. And thanks, everyone. And we will be back in just a few days.
Bye, everybody.
All right.